Welcome back to the show. Now, don't let anyone tell you that Detroit sports aren't on the rise. If we don't mention the Pistons,
there's the basketball team. Yeah,
we don't talk about. We don't talk.
They're over there in the corner thinking about what they've done.
We don't talk about that shadowy place, Simba. The Lions have ignited a winning spirit in the Motor City, and we saw that contagious winning mentality spread to the Tigers this year. I want to welcome back 9 and 10's David Leiden to talk more about the Tigers this magical season and how they hope to keep the good times rolling into next year. But first, they need a good offseason, David.
Yeah, that's what the focus is now. The season came to an end about a week ago, Saturday in Cleveland. Not the end everybody was hoping for, but they rode this momentum as far as they could.
And it depends on when you ask people. Because if you ask Tigers fans at the beginning of the season, this was more than they could have hoped for.
You were going to be happy with a winning record as a Tigers fan at the start of this year. And I think now as the focus shifts to the offseason, Scott Harrison, A.J. Hinch, and Chris Ilitch are looking at this offseason through a much different lens than what they were looking at it through even at the start of August. All of a sudden, you're looking at how do you retain some of this young talent? Yep. That young talent, especially Tarek Skubal, Jake Rogers, now finalist for the Gold Glove, Riley Green, all of the young guys who sort of made big names for themselves this year are going to be going to the front office and saying, let's restructure the contract here.
Guys,
let's have a little discussion.
You know those playoffs we got to? Well, I played a role in that.
And so that's kind of phase one. Phase one is lock up Tarek Skubal and address the pitching rotation.
That was my next question, was what needs to change in the offseason to bring the Tigers back even stronger next year?
So step one is unquestionably the
pitching
rotation. Jackson Jobe showed he can play a part in that. You obviously have Tarek Skubal, who showed he is a front of the rotation kind of guy. But what happens beyond that? Who's number 2, 3, and 4 in the rotation? Do they address that through the free agent market? Do they address that through a trade? Or do they look, or is there somebody in the farm system that is maybe ready to come up? Because the Tigers have shown, with what this season showed, is they can develop young talent. They can cultivate young talent into a playoff team, and the expectation next year in Motown is going to be getting back to that same level, back to the playoffs, competing for a division title next year at this point. But you have to have a more stable rotation just beyond a starter and then pitching chaos.
I love the fact that they were so successful with their bullpen days, but at the end of the day, this is Major League Baseball.
You can only ride that. You can only ride that pitching chaos and getting so far with the bullpen for so long before the cracks in the hull are going to start to get exposed. And I think we started seeing that a little bit in Game 4 and Game 5. The bullpen was just tired.
Well, and that's
Tarek Skubal was just tired.
And that's the thing with the bullpen is they're the bullpen. They have a very specific role, and when you shift that to pitching a couple innings every game, that's going to tire the arms out. It's not a way to go to the World Series. So, and I feel like that's what we want to see next year.
So solidifying the rotation is the big part. And second, I think a lot of Tigers fans, high on their wish list, is a little bit more oomph on the offensive side of the ball. Spencer Torkelson did not have the season that everybody expected him to have this year. He was still back on the team, but spent a significant part of the season down in AAA. Riley Green had a good year. Jake Rogers had a good year. But one of the things we really saw lacking in the playoffs was that big bat, that really big bat. Kerry Carpenter, God love him, had some huge hits, but certainly some offensive power.
But I would say in those circumstances that big power wasn't expected to come out of him. We need someone that's reliable, the big bat, clear the bases. Now, before we run out of time, because we could talk Tigers all day, let's move on to the Detroit Lions. Last weekend, absolutely trounced the Dallas Cowboys, but we also experienced a big loss that day, which we'll talk about in just a minute. But I want to discuss this weekend heading to Minnesota against an undefeated Vikings team with the lead of the NFC North.
Yeah,
on
big
the line.
NFC North showdown in Minnesota. Last time the Lions were in Minnesota, it was Christmas Eve, and they clinched the division last year. Minnesota team, not a lot of people expected to be 5-0, but they have surprised some people. Sam Darnold at quarterback has done some good things. They obviously have Justin Jefferson, one of the best wide receivers in the league. So it's going to be a very interesting matchup. The Lions, you could argue, are one or two boneheaded coaching decisions away. Should have beaten your Tampa Bay Bucks from being 5-0. So this is going to be a really interesting matchup to see how the Lions perform on defense without Aiden Hutchinson. But the offense has shown that they can go out there and put up points in bunches. 47 points last week in Dallas. 41 points 2 weeks before against the Seahawks.
And I've been reading a lot of people trying to write off the Lions' performance last weekend because, like, oh, well, Dallas doesn't have that great of a defense. What are you talking about? At the beginning of the season, Dallas had a top 15 defense. So that is nothing to scoff at, and you picked them apart last. Just look at this footage. Just picking them apart. Now, in our last couple of minutes here, David, let's talk about the loss that the Lions experienced this weekend.
Yeah, Aiden Hutchinson, obviously a big loss.
Big loss.
For the Lions.
A big hole.
Big hole to fill. You're filling really one of the best defensive players in the league.
In the league right now.
Leading or tied for the lead with sacks. So a big hole for the Lions to fill. I think they're going to be fine. If there's one thing that Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell have shown over the last several years in Detroit, it's about finding that diamond in the rough, either finding somebody on another team's practice squad or kind of buried a little deeper in the roster that can come into Detroit and fit in the system, or finding somebody on the team that can fill that void. Dan Campbell said this week it is next man up, and that has been his mentality for the past 3 years in Detroit. I know everybody wants the Lions to go out and get Max Crosby. You're talking about Hassan Reddick. You've got financial issues there. You can't mortgage, you can't take out a big mortgage right now without having money in the future. They've got big guys that need big contracts coming up. So I think they're going to find somebody who you maybe have never heard of or weren't thinking about.
Yeah, who can do the job, but don't expect an Aiden Hutchinson
But you're going to be standing up and cheering for him when he gets a big sack in a couple of weeks.
Yes, you are. David, thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Go Lions. It's going to be a fun weekend. You can catch that game on Local 32 at 1
o'clock. Take over
the
the top of the NFC North. And we're a little more than a week away from one of Northern Michigan's signature sporting events, the Traverse City Patriot Game. And Northern Michigan's sports leader will bring a special half-hour pregame show live from Thurlby Field next Friday from 4:30 to 5. The rivalry game between Traverse City West and Traverse City Central will honor the service of local veterans while also providing a financial boost to local nonprofits that give back to our service members. Our special half-hour pregame show airs on 9 and 10 live Friday afternoon from 4:30 to 5.